All right. Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us all here today. It's the start of a fresh new week. Today's shir should be Le'ilu Nishmas, our dear friend Menachem ben Yisrael Yaakov, as well as my dear aunt Rivka Bas Gavriel Tzvi, and for Dovid's grandfather Rab Shmuel ben Yosef Dov HaKoyen, as well as Le'ilu Nishma, as well as the Refuah Shalema Bekarov Meshalom ben Sarah Rachel, Miriam Bas Sarah, and as well as Yair Yeshia ben Chaya Etra, Shaar Refuah Shalema Bekarov. And Mendy, I know your daughter is doing great. I'm happy to hear that. Thank you so much for that good news. Today we are on page 88 for those who are following along in the art scroll. And we are coming on the fifth and final principle of complete bitachon in Hashem. And for me, this one is one of the most encouraging ones. It's one of my favorite of the principles, because this talks about our daily lives. It talks about our hishtadlus that we need to do. And it's the beginning of Rav Av discussing hishtadlus and the different nuances to it. And what's beautiful about it is because this is the most relatable portion of Rav Av, because we all live this every single day. Every single day we do things for different purposes also. Right? There's a hishtadlus for work, there's a hishtadlus for getting some other stuff done, but everything is intertwined into what we call, and what we just learned, what we call b'derech hateva, cause and effect. And today we're going to touch on that a lot. And so we start like this, and the fifth principle of complete bitachon is that v'hakdamas hachamisha she'izbar etzla. The fifth fundamental principle needed for a person to have full trust in Hashem is that he should understand clearly ki hishlomas hadvarim hamischatshim ba'olam hazeh la'achar hayitzira hu b'shnei dvarim. That after the initial creation of the world, after Sheshis Yimei Bereshis, when God created the world, the way all new things come about in this world is through a combination of two factors. When Hashem created the world, there was only one factor. Hashem said, let there be light. Let there be this, let there be that. Hashem created through a decree. That was a single factor. Now, Hashem rules and runs the world through a series of two factors. The first factor is decrees issued by the Creator, Hashem, and His will that those things should come into existence. Meaning Hashem first, the first factor is Hashem has to decree that should happen. Whatever that is. That people should be born, people should die, people should get rich, people should be poor. What exactly, how your life goes up, that's the decree portion. The second part, V'hasheni sibos imtzuim. And the second factor is the chain of causes and intermediate agents. What that means is a series of cause and effects, like we just learned last week. Is that through which those decrees are actualized. Meaning, Hashem, the first factor is the decree. Hashem says, I want to have this done. But unlike by Sheshis Yimei Bereshis, where Hashem said, let there be light, and there was a sun, Hashem makes a decree now, but then carries out those decrees with a chain of cause and effect. It says, Mehem kroivim, and some of these causes are immediate, meaning that they are at the end of the chain of cause and effect, meaning you see something that happened, and the cause of it, you saw the cause right before that, and you attribute that effect just from that last cause, because that's the closest one you can see. He says, and some of them are remote. An example, they're beginning of the chain of the cause and effect. Something happened, but the beginning of the process of this happening is very, very far back. It could be years, days, weeks, months. It could be Sheshis Yimei Bereshis. You don't know. It's something that happened earlier that started this ball rolling, got this ball rolling. Some of them, these causes are evident. You can see them, say, oh wow, now I see why Hashem did this, because that was part of that chain, cause and effect, and part of the chain. And we see those causes that led to the final result. He says, some of them are hidden and we don't get to see them. But all of the causes hasten collectively to bring out whatever was decreed by Hashem to happen in this world. And so we have to understand, some of them we'll see, some of them we won't see, some of them are going to be close to the actual results, some of them are further out in time. But at the end of the day, we have to understand that all this is a process that we need in order to have a result. Without this process, we do not have a result. This is be'ezo lekim lahem alzer, and with Hashem helping them in all this process. Now, Rav Av gives an illustration. He gives an example of chain of cause and effects that lead to certain things becoming a reality. In the illustration, he identifies the most direct cause, the most distant cause, and the intermediate factors between those two causes. And further, he notes that all these causes must be in place in order to have the result. If you're missing one of these causes, you do not have the result desired, needed, or decreed by Hashem. And that's what he's going to go into. And this is the example that he gives. He says, "V'dimyon asibas hakrevas batzaz hamayim emeke b'ha'aretz begalgal." An illustration of the immediate cause can be found in the process of removing water from a well deep in the earth by means of a water wheel system. And so we might not have exactly this picture in our mind, but understand we have a well, the old-fashioned picture of a well, not today's days with a pump, but that could also be put into perspective. Let's put the old-fashioned perspective. We had a well that had a bar, it had a rope, it had a bucket, and it had someone pulling it. And it had different pulley systems depending on what it's looking for. And he says over here, Kikelim hamalim es hamayim min habe'er, with buckets that are attached to the last wheel, bringing the water up from the well. And what you would have there is that you would have an animal pulling, maybe turning a wheel, maybe something like that, and that animal would be the energy needed in order to get that moving. And so the buckets being the final link in the chain of causes are the immediate cause of the desired result, meaning the final link in the chain of cause and effect is that bucket that holds the water, because your end result is you want the water. And so you have that bucket, that's the last link of the cause and effect. And then you have a remote cause and effect, because remember, we're talking about the most closest one, the most remote one, and then the intermediaries. He says the remote cause of obtaining the water is the person who harnesses an animal to the first wheel. So you have the human being that takes the animal, ties it up to something, so that it can cause the energy. So when the animal moves, it can cause that rope to bring up that water from the pail. And who prods the animal to move in order to turn that wheel, so as to make the other wheels turn, and thus bring the water from the depths of the well up to the surface, so you can have that. However, the causes that are between the person and the buckets are intermediaries between the two things. He says between the man and the buckets. The most furthest link and the closest link. The bucket and the energy required. He says, those intermediaries are the animal that is harnessed to the wheel, their interconnected wheels that move each other, and the rope that connects the buckets to the last wheel. So you see we have the furthest and closest cause or parts of the chain, but you have the mid portion that he explains. Now, if something were to go wrong with anything in between, if the chain breaks, the rope tears, or if the bucket has a hole in it, or if there's a link or a gear that's broken, you could have the first person who's bringing the animal to bring the energy, and you can have the bucket who's going to pull up the water at the end of the day. But if something broken in the middle of that, the result will never happen. You won't have a bucket of water, which you desire. Now, if something should go wrong with any one of those mentioned causes, whether the intermediate cause, the remote cause, or any of the intermediate causes, lo yigomeh ha'inyan ha'mechaven behem. The objective that you are meant to achieve would not be achieved. You will not have that water. All these causes must be in place. Every single one of these in the chain. Likewise, other things that become a reality, not just the water, cannot be accomplished by man or any other force. Except, first thing that we spoke about, that needs two things. First one is that decreed by Hashem. Hashem is the decree that you should have that. And the second one is and His providing the cause through which they are completed. So Hashem says, you should have this. Then Hashem goes and creates the chain of cause and effect in order for you to have that. Because Hashem is not going to just say, let there be money. He could do that, but how Hashem runs the world is not like that. He treats the world in a way of cause and effect. So first he writes down, okay, I want you to have this outcome. Now Hashem goes and creates the playbook. How long it should be, what it's going to require, all the things, and he makes it b'derech hateva. So it doesn't look like a nace, even though we learned that it is a nace. But the point is that he creates that cause and effect, creates the storyline into what from the beginning until the end to that outcome of what you need or what you desire. He says, he brings a pasuk v'lo niskenu alilas. It says about Hashem and Shmuel, it says he has count of causes, meaning that he calculates all the causes that he will be needed to make something happen. So Hashem is the most amazing planner. Like you have people out there says, hey, I want this to happen. And then they go and they do a whole plan, a whole spreadsheet, a whole document, a whole presentation. God's like the most amazing planner. He says, I'm decreed something to happen. This person is perfect. I'm going to make this happen. He can either make a short movie, a 30-minute episode. He can make a 5,000-year movie out of this. And that's what Hashem is great at, as well as other things. V'amar Gedol ha'etza v'rava aliyah. And it says about Hashem in Yirmiyahu, it says, great in counsel and master of the cause, meaning that he controls all the causes. And further it says, V'amar ki yosa siba me'em Hashem. And also says, for it was designed by Hashem, which shows that he orchestrates causes to bring about the results he desires. V'im tiyena hasibas nedras b'chlal. And if those causes were to be totally absent, meaning all those different pieces, loy tegama yetzias davar min ha'pa'olas hatvias al geda havaya. Nothing would ever come into being through natural processes, since Hashem has set up the world to operate specifically through cause and effect. And he says over here, it's not that Hashem can't make something happen just like he did by Sheshis Me'er Bereshis. When he said, let this happen, let there be light, let there be water, all these different things. It's not that Hashem can't do that. And there are instances over history that we've seen that Hashem did do stuff like that. We've seen open nisim. But the way Hashem runs and rules the world is through cause and effect, and so he plays it out, he maps it out so that it looks like it's something that's part of normalcy. And that's how he runs the world. And now, having established that Hashem runs the world with cause and effect, Rav Av teaches that man must make use of that system to engage in ishtadlus. And here's where we have the concept of cause and effect, and now we have to understand the ishtadlus portion. And he says personal effort that we need in order to obtain what we need and what we desire in our lives. Now, when we examine whether it is necessary for a man to strive and exert himself to accomplish his objectives, meaning we have to break our backs every single day to go to work, in order so we could put food on the table, so that we could build a home and put our children through school, raise them as Yireh Shemayim, and marry them off, and everything beautiful that we do in our lives, we find that this is clearly necessary, meaning that we must have ishtadlus in our life. Why? For example, if someone needs nourishment, then even when suitable food, example, a cooked, ready-to-eat meal, you go and you have someone puts right in front of you a ready-to-cook meal, you still need some ishtadlus. And he brings out, there's different levels of ishtadlus out there. And you might think ishtadlus means going to work only. No, there's different parts needed. He says when someone puts in front of you a ready-cooked meal, it's placed in front of him on the table, if he does not exert himself to eat it by lifting his hand with a fork and putting that food towards his mouth to chew it, he'll still go hungry. It's hishtadlus. There's effort that's required on your side in order to make that happen. And I'm going to compare that to you. Unfortunately, there are people that are never sick and they're in a hospital and they have an IV. They don't have to do hishtadlus in order to survive. They are just hooked onto an IV, unfortunately, and that's how they're getting their nourishment. But take a sick person, but a healthy person needs to exert some sort of energy, some sort of effort in order to feed himself, even if someone were to put a ready-cooked meal on the table right in front of you. His hunger will not be satiated if he didn't do that. The same applies to a thirsty person when he has the need of water. And all the more, so when we will have to expend effort, should he not have the food until he goes about preparing it. What does that mean? Here I spoke about for a second when someone had a prepared meal placed in front of him. You sat down at a simcha and the waiter brought it to you. By grinding, kneading, baking, and the like. That means he had to go out, cut down some wheat, grinding it, making it into flour, getting the water, making it into a dough, baking it, and then getting to eat it. That's even more of ishtadlus that he has to do. And even greater, more difficult effort will be necessary if he has to first go buy the raw ingredients. I mean, he doesn't have it ready for him in his cupboard. He has to go out and buy it, and then prepare and do all that whole process. And even more than that is if he does not have the money. So you could go to the grocery, but if you don't have the grocery, what do you got to do next? In which case he will need to even greater exertion by effort by mentioned earlier, whether by hiring himself out for pay, or by selling items, assets, or other like that he needs in order to obtain money to buy the food, to grind the wheat, to bake the dough, to bake it in the oven, to be able to exert himself the energy to pick up his mouth and pick up his hand and put it into his mouth. What we learn from these examples is that at the end of the day, we are required some sort of level of ishtadlus. Every person needs to do ishtadlus every single day. Some more, some less. Don't think of ishtadlus only in like, I need to go to work. You also need to do other things, and as we will learn, there's so much more to it. But ishtadlus is something that we need to do. The concept over here, what I want you to take away from this today, is that all these things are part of the chain of cause and effect. If you don't go out to work and don't have the money to buy it, it's a broken part of the chain, and in order for you to get the food. That doesn't mean you're not going to eat. You might get it a different way because Hashem is going to make sure of that, and in his way of cause and effect. But again, it's cause and effect that things happen. I want you to internalize that because I want you to understand that when we go out every single day and we do stuff to do work in order to get by, in order to put food on the table, in order to have an end goal, and I'll repeat what I spoke about last week. There's a book by Simon Sinek, Know Your Why or Find Your Why. When you have these different things, there's a result that you're looking for. And that result is the end of the cause of effect, the chain of cause and effect. And so when we go out and do ashtadlis, and you have those reasonings for doing those things, understand that everything is required in the middle. The same way when you run a business, there's COGS in a business, cost of doing business. You have a product you can buy this mouse for $1, sell it for $2, make $1. But you still have in between, you have to pay employees to fulfill those orders. You have to pay your accountant in order to get your taxes done. You have to pay the cleaning lady in order to clean the office. There's different parts involved in that, in getting this item sold. And that's what Hashem is trying to explain, the cause and effect. There's different parts involved in this world in order to get your end result. And Hashem knows what's best for you. Hashem knows what your end result needs to be. And he's going to make it happen, but you have to understand and be patient that there's the cause and effect system that's in place over here. And that's a very, very important principle that we need to understand going into the depths and the meat of Shaar Habitachon in the next couple of weeks. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And before I close today, I just want to say a special shout out to my wife and myself. And we have the zechus, last night of celebrating 20 years of marriage, our 20th anniversary. It means a lot to us. And I just wanted to mention on the shir because the shir is the second most important thing in my life today, and other than my family. And so I wanted to mention that. Thank you to my beautiful wife, Esty, for 20 beautiful years, and to many, many, many more in the future. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today, and I love you all.